Hello, BookTube. We're back for another installment. This is, I think, Chapter 5 of my 2022 library tour, which I'm doing partly as a kind of Goodreads record of for myself to look at these videos and actually see, instead of just reading a ledger, but see the books that I had in 2022. And also for your titillation, for your enjoyment. I've had a number of emails from a lot of you. I leave my email on every video. Feel free to email me about any subject at all. It doesn't have to be books. I get plenty of emails. I'm now in years-long correspondence with plenty of people on subjects that don't have anything to do with books, and it's a delight. It's an honor. Just as long as we're all on the same page about speed of response and also equal length of response. If you send me a 10,000-word email, A, I'm unlikely to get to it ever, because something that long is immediately going to trigger the part of my brain that says work. And B, if I do get to it, and the reason why I should say it that way, it's going to trigger the part of my brain that says work, and I don't want you to think that I don't do work. I do work, but you're not paying me. So work is done for pay. So it's not just that, but even if I decide to dig into an email that long, A, I'm not going to respond at that length. No way possible. And B, it's not going to be immediate. I'm not going to be, zipping out a reply right away. Every once in a while, some of you have noticed over the years when you've been emailing me about this, that, or the other thing, it doesn't have to be books. Some of you have noticed that if I am on a deadline that I hate, if I'm doing something tedious, if I'm trying to forestall the evil day, then I will respond right away, and sometimes at length, but that has nothing to do with your email. That's just me using you, just like tissue, and then wadding you up and throwing you over my shoulder. But I've had a number of emails about the library tour. Even in its infancy here, I've had a number of people email and say they like the stories about the books. A number of you have said, every once in a while on these library tour videos, I'm remembering to include links to as many of these books as I've written about. And a number of you said that you really enjoy that, which is really kind of weird. Since I just automatically don't picture. I picture that BookTube will be most interested in what I say on camera. And will mostly overlook the fact that I was writing about every book under the sun for a long time, not only before I heard about YouTube, but before there was a YouTube. So I'll try to remember to do that. The problem is that a lot of those old pieces of mine are unformatted. They were bulk transported over from one server to another, and I haven't gone in. I ought to make a systematic approach. I ought to go in and do 10 a day. If I'd done that for the last 5 years, a lot of them would be done by now, but instead, I haven't done that, and so I will look up a book and I will see, yes, you did write 1,000 words on the book, but none of it is formatted. So the picture links are broken, the paragraph breaks aren't there anymore. There's nothing. It has to be redone. It doesn't have to be rewritten, but it has to be reformatted, and that takes time that I don't always have because I'm an amateur booktuber, so I never factor in post-production time. Never. I don't have any post-production. That is technically post-production work, but I will try my hardest. So we'll do a couple of shelves today, and we'll start with the Transwise books because you can't get to the other books without them. Okay, this we saw just recently on this channel. Yes. Well, no, not recently. It was 2 years ago. This is Captain Joshua Slocum's book, Sailing Alone Around the World, in this cute little Shambhala Press edition that is kind of the thing I was looking for. This has had a million editions, and I love it. It's one of the great nautical books of all time, but I knew that I wanted this edition. These Shambhala Press things are so nice, and they have the illustrations and the built-in cloth bookmark, so I held out until I found it. The copy that I found was in wretched condition. These are so pretty that I don't want to use, packing tape to reinforce the cover, but I had no choice, or the cover wouldn't have lasted. There's always a chance that I'll see it again in another Shambhala Press edition. Then what do we have here? Okay, this is The Primal Place by Robert Finch. This is a book about Cape Cod. Robert Finch is one of the great chroniclers of Cape Cod. I think this might have been his first book. Or maybe Common Ground came before this one. This came out in 1983, so it would have been close. This would have been close to the first. But he has a whole shelf of very genial books about Cape Cod that I strongly recommend if you know the Cape or are interested in it. Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there's the state of Massachusetts is a rectangle, and then there's a fishhook extending out into the Atlantic Ocean, and that fishhook is Cape Cod, that starts at the bridge and then goes all the way to the end, which is Provincetown, a haven for the gays. And I have been over every inch of Cape Cod 80 million times in every weather, in every season, for decades. I love it dearly. I love it dearly. I would love to get some sort of a recurrent book reviewing gig at a Cape Cod paper. Except I review books. I have a recurring book reviewing gig for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, which is an island off the coast of Cape Cod. I don't know if that would count as a conflict of interest. I've never actually tried, and I suppose I could just ask my editor at the Gazette if he would mind. I don't know what kind of books coverage there even is on the Cape. That would be a lot of fun to do. I should check into that. Then the last of the Transwise books is this old copy of the Essays of E.B. White. We saw Onward and Upward in the Garden, and this is the husband of the writer of Onward and Upward in the Garden, most famous for Charlotte's Web. And his essays, the essays in here are fantastic. The most famous of one, I'm absolutely sure that it's in here. It must be. The one that is most anthologized is Once More to the Lake. And that's in here. And look at the cover photo for the author. I mean, you can make it out there. That used to be the norm for New England winters, is that if you wanted to do anything outside, if you wanted a picture taken or any kind of thing like that, you had to deal with a foot or more of snow. It was just going to be there until spring. And that's not true anymore. Boston is well on track to have the lowest snow accumulation ever in its recorded history. That, I think, will certainly happen. Storms just peter out before they get here. There was talk of a messy kind of snowstorm on Monday, and within a day, all of that meteorological talk was that it would be warm spring rain. And it will be. So I don't know. I look at pictures like this now with a different kind of resonance every time I see one on the back of a book. So those are the Transwise books. Now we'll move on here. Oh, okay, great. All right, we have two Faber UK hardcovers of P.D. James. This is Devices and Desires, and then we have The Murder Room. So I have two of these. I only have two of these. I would very much I would make room in this room for a whole shelf of Faber and Faber UK hardcover editions of P.D. James, especially Original Sin, which is my favorite P.D. James novel, of course. It's all about a publishing house, but I don't have it. I only rely on Happen's Chance to find these things, and I've only found these two. In years of looking for them, I've only found these two. So there are plenty of UK trade paperbacks, but UK hardcovers of P.D. James are what I want. I go back to her books enough to justify that. I will find them eventually. I will find them. Like I always mention, Boston has an international airport, Logan International Airport, which is a 15-minute subway ride from the Brattle Bookshop. And if you get a P.D. James or bring a P.D. James over, and then you get a ton of books at the Brattle Bookshop, you might think about leaving your P.D. James behind. And that's how UK editions tend to show up at the Brattle. So it will happen. It's just a long, slow process. Boy, though, that is something I know. These are something that I know I would put in this room. Just a collection of UK hardcovers of P.D. James. I know that those would come in here. What do we got here? Oh, okay, great. This is a trade paperback of the Peviar and Volkonsky translation of War and Peace. I have the hardcover also in this room, so I'm not sure what this is doing here. It's taking up valuable real estate when it is plain and simple a double. I mean, if it comes to an ergonomic choice, do I want the paperback or do I want the hardcover? Well, then make a choice and keep that one, but don't keep both in this room. But I'm going to put it back here just for now, because part of the joy of doing a library tour is I want all of you to discover. I want all of you to do a library tour in 2022, all of you. And one of the joys of doing that, in addition to making a visual record of what you had at that moment, and in addition to the sheer fun of somebody holding up the books in their collection, that is so much fun. You know that as well as I do. Those videos thrill. They are so much fun. But in addition to all of that, I have always found when doing a library tour of any kind that it really clarifies the mind about deadweight, which is a kind of a morbid thing to think about a library tour, but very helpful. Oh, okay, all right. This next one is also Robert Finch. This is Common Ground. This may be his first book. So we have two, but they weren't right next to each other. Now were they? And also, you can't help but notice they're not on a whole shelf of Cape Cod books. I have at least 30 Cape Cod books, and they're not all together, which is insane. But and we saw a Martha's Vineyard book as well, right? We saw To the Harbor Light is here somewhere. a quintessential Martha's Vineyard book. But anyway, there's this. So this is another just lyrical essays about a beautiful, wonderful place. If you fight with tourists and worry about your car and are overcharged for rental and you go just to vacation on the vineyard, you won't get a sense of what the place is like. Unless you're vacation for a long time, you won't get a sense of the sheer wonder of the place. That infects people. It makes them write about it. That's why I have so many books on the phone. Okay. Okay, this is Traps Bryant. This is Dog Days at the White House. This is a book about, this came out in when? The 70s? 1975. This is a book about the dog guy at the White House. I think his title was Kennel Keeper, but he was really the all-purpose dog guy. Do you need somebody to walk your dog? Do you need somebody to understand your dog? Do you need somebody to sit with your dog if you have to go to the G7 or whatever? And he did that for many administrations at the White House, and decided to write a book about it. And I have a real soft spot for Washington, Dc Memoirs. That soft spot, of course, ends now. But up until the election, up until the administration of Barack Obama, and everything before then, I had a real soft spot for those kinds of stories, those kinds of memoirs. I have them going back 100 years, and also just general impression memoirs of living in Washington in the orbit of the White House, which is a world unto itself. I know that world fairly well, and I used to live in Washington, or I used to live right near Washington, D.C. and work in the Capitol. And I have developed a soft spot at that time for those kinds of books. Just love them. And usually they're terrible. Usually they're really, really bad. This is really, really good. Traps Bryant had all sorts of stories, and he just manages to preserve them all here. This front cover illustration is a composite picture. A little bit of a composite. It shouldn't be. If this were ever reprinted in my fantasy, in a deluxe decal-edge paperback with French flaps and everything, if this were ever reprinted, I know just what the cover would be, and it wouldn't be this. This is a monstrosity. Instead, it would be the main picture. That is Lyndon Johnson. And he is greeting one of his beagles. He had, at the time this picture was taken, he had two beagles, him and her. And they adored him. Those of you who know your dogs, especially those of you who know your beagles, will know that that beagle is overjoyed to see that human. And beagles don't always act that way. They aren't usually overjoyed to see humans. And he was always glowingly overjoyed to see them. Always. And that picture, the background of that picture is actually the White House itself. I don't know why they didn't just include the whole picture on the cover. That's the picture that I would use. Johnson didn't walk out on the front lawn of the White House, and he didn't greet his dogs there either. But the actual original picture, if you go to Google image search and type in Johnson Beagles, I bet this will be the first picture that comes up. And it's adorable. It might be the President of the United States, and it might be a fairly maligned President of the United States, but it is a purely accurate dog moment. Everyone who's ever had a dog will have that moment. And I love it for that reason. I think it's one of the great presidential pictures. Of course, I would think that, wouldn't I? And that ought to be the cover of this book. This book will never be reprinted. Of course, it will never be reprinted, but I can dream, can't I? Then we have an anthology. We've seen a lot of anthologies in this room. I'm noticing that I have a lot of anthologies. That's great. That's fine by me. Good anthologies are worth their weight in gold. Oh, what's happening? Am I ascending to my Father in heaven? I'm going. Should I leave the camera and try to curtain the window? Will that help any? Oh, no, that didn't help much at all. Here, sorry, Bee. Herself is, of course, right on the bed. There we go. That's a little bit better. At least it's not my glowing face. This is a great anthology. I've recommended it to many of you. I've sent copies of it to many of you. I see the paperback all the time, and had the paperback for a long time, and then I found the hardcover. I want the hardcover because I go back to this all the time. This is The Art of the Personal Essay by Philip Lopate, who just recently got finished with a 3-volume anthology of the American Essay. It's really good. I reviewed a couple of those volumes. Again, I remember, if I can, I will leave links to everything that I've written about down below, just in case you want to do that. That 3-volume set is a nightmare to all of you anal retentive people out there, because it's in different formats. Why, I have no idea. The first one was published as a normal hardcover and then had, I think, will have a paperback release. The next two were published as paperbacks and I think different sizes. So it's a mess. And that's a shame because it's a great trilogy. He did a fantastic job with that trilogy. But this is the original. This is the mother of all things. This is just a fantastic collection of the personal essay going back, not limited to America. So it has a much wider ambit. Just fantastic. Okay. All right, our next book takes us back to the summer of 1916 on the Jersey Shore. Blisteringly hot summer. When something happened on the Jersey Shore, something terrifying happened. The country was in the middle of World War I. No end in sight. But people were still flocking to seaside resorts. And a shark killed someone. The first recorded shark attack in American history in that location. And then killed someone else, and then attacked someone else, and then went up the Matawan Creek and attacked someone 11 miles from shore. And there were, at the same time, this book came out in, I think, 1990? 2001. This came out in 2001. This is Michael Capuzzo's Close to Shore, which that is the cover, and that cover is tremendously effective. And then some of you may be familiar with the paperback release of this book, which is much less effective because they photoshopped in a shark fin. This is more foreboding without it. The clouds on the horizon do the trick. At the same time that this book came out, a book called 12 Days of Terror also came out, also on the Matawan, also on the New Jersey shark attacks of 1916. Two of them together. I felt so sorry for both authors. And especially since they're both worthy books and the books are completely different. Close to Shore is much more cinematic. It's much more of, the gripping story. And 12 Days of Terror is much more sociological. About it's about the attacks as well in great detail, but it's also about what shark attacks mean and how it reflected on even, wartime xenophobia and whatnot. Both very interesting books. I don't have a copy of 12 Days of Terror. I did. Once upon a time, I had the two of these from time immemorial together on the shelf. Where my hardcover copy of 12 Days of Terror went, I have no idea. When I see it again, that is definitely, like the hardcover hardcover P.D. James, that is definitely the book I want for this room. I'm waiting to find the hardcover, that's all. But this is grippingly told. Even if you know the story. I know the story inside and out, and I was still thrilled by this particular. I don't think it can be done better. I don't think the Matawan Creek shark attacks can be done better. The only quibble that I have with this book, maybe, is that Capuzzo seems fairly complacent with speculation that it was a juvenile great white shark that did the killing. Based, I think, on sketchy visual glimpses that people had, which were totally unreliable, and are contradicted, I think, by the facts that this shark swam up river and attacked someone in fresh water. That seems to me to be much more mature bull shark than an immature great white shark. An immature great white shark wouldn't even be doing this repeatedly, much less going inland. But that's a trivial thing compared to the worth of the book. Then we have, this is by David Anthony Durham, who wrote a historical novel called The Pride of Carthage that I thought was okay. It was okay. But then he wrote something called The Risen about Spartacus. This is a Spartacus novel, right alongside things like Howard Fast's book. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Never for a minute occurred to me not to include it in this room. Just fantastic historical fiction. Then this next one is great. It is a great work of American natural history. I had this forever and ever in a hardcover that was held together with duct tape and goodwill, and never thought it would be otherwise. I know this will never be reprinted, and I never thought it would be otherwise. And then one day at the Brattle, I believe, at the Brattle in 2017, I encountered a hardcover book with a library Mylar dust jacket on it. Fantastic, with a dust jacket. This is Mammals of North America. By Victor Callahan. And you've got a moose on the cover looking like it wants to kill you, because all moose do. And then the inside has natural histories of all of these animals. There are walruses with these illustrations that are just great. There's an ocelot on the back there. And also the author's stories. Callahan encountered almost all of these animals in the wild, or at least talked to people who did. So it's not just Audubon field guide. It's much, much more enjoyable than that. And I found it in this beautiful copy. I'd been going back to that beaten up hardcover forever and ever, gingerly so as not to destroy it, because I love revisiting these things. You already know, I have a sweet spot for black and white, gorgeous black and white illustrations like this. I should probably name the illustrator, shouldn't I? The drawings are by Francis Jacks, and they're great. And I have a soft spot for that. That's also a very prevalent theme in Cape Cod books. They're almost all illustrated. This next one is another historical novel. So that's 2 on this shelf. This is James Goldman's book, Myself as Witness. His novel about King John. This is the author of the play, The Lion in Winter. And also a contemporary novel, The Man from Greek and Roman, that no one reads anymore. I wish it were reprinted, but no one bothers with it anymore. And then no one's ever going to reprint this either. But this is a novel about... The Lion in Winter was about Henry II and his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and their 3 living sons, Richard, Geoffrey, and John. And this novel is about John once John is king. And John is, of course, a notoriously feckless and ineffective king. And this is the novel all about that, which I would have eaten up anyway. It's terrific. Absolutely terrific. It's every bit as quippy and slangy and rife with human insight as The Lion in Winter, the stage play. But also, it's narrated by Gerald of Wales, so of course I was going to love it. Of course I was. You'd have to Google Gerald of Wales. This is too long a video for me to go into him, but he and I go way back. I dearly, dearly love him. Okay, then we have a hardcover copy of The Stories of John Cheever, one of the great story anthologies in American fiction. I don't think it needs much defending on my part. Maybe Cheever is on the bridge of being canceled, or maybe he's been canceled already and I just wasn't informed. There are so many victims every day, it's hard to keep track of who's been canceled. But these are brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. When he was on his form, and he is in a lot of these stories, there's virtually nobody writing in the short form in America that can beat him. So I had the little red mass market paperback forever and ever. And I think most of America did as well. That thing sold in truck stops. And it fell apart, and I would get another one, and it fell apart. And then I was working in a bookstore and realized, oh my God, they're not going to reprint that little red mass market paperback anymore. Publishers are getting away from mass market paperbacks. So that's when I started looking for a nice hardcover that would not fall apart. So I could, because I go back, some of these stories I reread every year. Should we do another shelf? I think we should. I think we should do another shelf. Let's try anyway. This next one, we'll go down one shelf here. These are all, this shelf is a little smaller, so these are all small hardcovers and trade paperbacks. And the first trade paperback is a new release of Anno Dracula by Kim Newman. The first in what turned out to be a series that I think is ongoing, where this author has the mother of all great premises for a novel about Dracula, which is that Dracula is just one of many vampire bloodlines in the world. And that Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula, is historical fiction. Not fiction, but historical fiction. It's alternate fiction. Because Kim Newman's fantastic insight is that what really happened is that Dracula succeeded. Dracula, in Bram Stoker's novel, he is, a vampire in the Carpathians, and he wants to conquer England. He wants to start spreading vampires through England. That's why he packs coffins with dirt. That's why he starts turning Lucy. That's why he comes to England himself to try to set up a coven of the undead and slowly spread them around. And he is stopped in the novel. He's stopped in England, and then there's a breakneck chase back to the Carpathian Mountains. But in Kim Newman's conceit here is that is just wishful thinking. That was Bram Stoker's wishful thinking, because Dracula actually succeeded. And now you're in an England here, a 19th century England that is rife with vampires of many different bloodlines. And Dracula himself has risen all the way to Prince Consort, to Queen Victoria. And you get a mixed cast of characters here. You get humans who are very stubbornly human. You get humans who have been recently turned. They are recently vampires. You get established vampires. You get the main character, the heroine of the story, is from, she's older than Dracula, and she's from a bloodline that's purer than his, which gives her technically greater vampiric powers than he has. But also, as the joy of the whole thing, the cherry on top of this whole conceit is that Kim Newman fills it with 19th century characters, both historical and fictional. Every Victorian fictional character you can think of appears in this book or its sequels, and that just makes it a hoot. So much fun. Okay, then this next one is from a long time ago. This came out in 1942. This is by Cornelia Otis Skinner and Emily Kimbrough, and it is Our Hearts Were Young and Gay. And once again, I had a mass market paperback of this that I read until it fell to dust, and then I got another one, and then I got another one, and then it came a day when I realized I'm not seeing it anymore. I should find the hardcover. So I did. I found the hardcover. This is their a madcap nonfiction account of their various adventures, the adventures that they get into. Some of it hasn't aged well. Some of it will probably prevent the book from ever being rediscovered or reprinted, because there are more casual, funny, and even condescending views towards black people, towards Negro spirituals, that sort of thing. There are little bits and pieces in here that I think 21st century censor would cut out. No, this, for state literature, this won't do. So I don't know that Our Hearts Were Young and Gay will ever be reprinted, but it was once upon a time the book that everyone was reading, and I love it, absolutely love it. What have we got? Oh, okay, great. This is the first really jump off anthology of Philip Kerr. These are his first 3 Bernie Gunter novels in an anthology called Burrell Noir. That you won't always see it looking like this. For a long time I sold this book. It was a trade paperback, but it was a white cover with a bridge on it. This has a bridge as well, but it doesn't look like that one. And I grabbed this right away when I saw it. The last time I saw it, this was fairly recently. Is this fairly recently? No, this was 2018. That's a long time ago. But these star Bernie Gunther are down at heels, but doggedly righteous police investigator in Nazi Germany. So he still cares about right and wrong, even though he's working for a government that is the epitome of wrong, in the opinion of 70 million adult Americans, I should say. In the opinion of 210 million adult Americans, they're not the epitome of wrong. Joe Biden, the mild-mannered Catholic president of the United States right now, is the epitome of wrong. And for those 210 million Americans, having Nazi flags on every building and being forced to salute the Fuhrer, who would be a Trump member of the Trump family, isn't that bad. I mean, as long as I get to own that uppity brother-in-law of mine, I'm okay with being a slave. but you know what I mean. I didn't think I was going to get a digression in, did you? But you underestimated me. The Bernie Gunther novels are great. Absolutely great. I don't have all of them, but you should definitely try them out. If you're looking for a new murder mystery series and you haven't tried them out, then get Berlin Noir from your library, because you're going to fall in love. And if you do fall in love, you're going to have a lot of books to read. Okay, this next one's a Wordsworth classic. I don't know why I have this. This is a trade paperback of Pride and Prejudice. I think maybe the reason that I have this is because it has an adorable Edwardian painting on the cover, but there's no scene like that in Pride and Prejudice. And there's no reason for me to have this when I have probably 20 editions of Pride and Prejudice. Plus, of course, I have it online. I have an ebook, many ebooks. So there's no reason for this to be here, and yet here it is. Oh, all right. This is a cute little art thing. I don't have the dust jacket for this, but this is a cute little art book, William and His Friends, from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Let me show you who we're talking about here. William is a statue in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That doesn't do him justice because he's brilliant blue. But that is William. And he is, let's see, the inscription says, nearly 4,000 years ago, there lived in Egypt a steward named Senbi. When he died, figures of men and animals were placed in his tomb for his use in the afterlife. Some were to do his work, others to assure him of good hunting. Among them was this blue hippopotamus. The lotus flowers painted on its sides were to represent those that grew in its favorite haunts along the Nile. And this little book, William and His Friends, is all about all sorts of other animals in the Met's collection. It's just I found it years and years ago. It's just an adorable thing that I had to keep it. Okay, this next one is a Pelican Shakespeare edition of Henry VIII. The Shakespeare's Henry VIII. This is edited by Jonathan Crew. I love these Pelican editions. I used to have them all. But Henry VIII has a special place in my heart as in the Shakespeare canon. So I think this is the only one that I have left. Maybe I have Julius Caesar somewhere else. And there on the cover you have the Globe Theatre burning. Those of you who know your history of Henry VIII will appreciate that. Okay. All right, this next one is from 1931. Never had a reprint, never will have a reprint. This is just a total incunabula. This is by Paulina Coney Drown, and it is a profile of Mrs. Bell, who was a figure in Boston history. This is tiny little thing. I got this, oh God, this I must have found this 30 years ago. And Mrs. Bell was fantastic. She was a wit. She was a raconteur. She was an absolute regular of the Boston Athenaeum, a private library up on Beacon Hill. Everybody knew her. People dreaded her coming to their dinner soirees because she had a sharp tongue. She was one of those salt of the earth, old New England biddy beans that doesn't take any guff from anybody. They're not mean, but they don't take any guff from anybody. They're never they won't say a kind word if it isn't merited. And this book is basically, I mean, it's a story. It's got all sorts of stories in it of Mrs. Bell, but it's basically just a biography and anecdotes of her. And some of them are wonderful. Let me read you just a sample here. She was never a conscious phrase maker, and yet her sayings had the power of the inevitable word. She spoke once of William James's use of English, his words like coins fresh from the mint, every line clear-cut with the rest of us, while the rest of us use words all rubbed smooth. In describing James, she was describing herself, for her use of language was as unique as his. Could there be a more perfect description of the type of religion which rests on authority? Quote, how wonderful it must be to have that spiritual director come in and say, put down the Bride of Lammermoor and go to number 5 Skunk Court. Or when someone asked her of a young man invited much one winter in Boston society, meaning he was always at every party. Invited much means one winter in Boston society, someone asked her, does he know anything? And she said, know anything? He doesn't even suspect. This book is full of stories like that. It's got my favorite story in it is that a hopeful Boston book section editor sent her a basket of new releases, hoping that he could get an essay out of her. And she sent him back. They were all so terrible that she sent him back the books with a little bouquet of flowers and a note that said simply, I forgive you. Okay, then we have an Everyman's Library edition of the critical essays of Matthew Arnold, introduction by C.K. Chesterton. Very happy to have this cute little volume, but of course it doesn't belong in here. These are critical essays. It belongs, I have a whole bookcase for critical essays. And I'm wondering if it's in here because it's just the right size. That is the bad reason to have a book on a shelf, because it fits the book. Okay, yeah, same thing here. This is Etc. Essays by Augustine Burrell. These are literary essays. They belong, I mean, John Bunyan, John Wycliffe, a couple of essays on reviewing itself. A joy to read, but they don't belong in here. So I'll have to address this when the time comes. Okay, yes, and here we go. Here we have Thomas de Quincey, the author of Confessions of an English Opium Eater, and this is biographical and historical essays. This is, I'm sure, this was part of a long shelf of collected de Quincey, and this is the only volume of that shelf that I would want. This is his paid literary work. Essay on Goethe, essay on William Godwin, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Charles Lamb. Terrific stuff, but almost all of it is literary, so it ought not to be in here. There's a shelf for that out there. Oh, okay, great. This is the Penguin Classic edition of Aubrey's Brief Lives. John Aubrey decided to write dreamed that it would be his age's answer to the Parallel Lives of Plutarch, and he took it a step further and went and got the active help of a lot of people. In the subjects of his little biographies, this is just a collection of little biographies, and the subjects of his little biographies that he wanted to include who were still alive, he would often ask them for help. One famously, he sent him a blank sheet of paper. This is the help that I will give you for my biography. And this edition is edited by Oliver Lawson Dick and has a standout, just outstanding, long essay at the front reconstructing Aubrey's life from his writings. This is the case of a Penguin edition that reprints a very worthy book. Aubrey's Brief Lives are really interesting to read, but where the whole value of this is in the introduction. That is fantastic. Very nice to have this. Oh, and the bookmark is a preserved Doonesbury cartoon. How many of you know Doonesbury cartoons? This is obviously from the 80s. First panel is you hear helicopter sounds. You've got men, enlisted men. There you hear thump, thump, thump. There he is. And they're talking to each other. It's obviously President Bush, kind of going to see the troops. Man, look at that. He travels with 3 choppers. Well, he is running the whole show, they say to each other. And then one of them says, I wonder what the old man's going to harangue us about today. And then you hear the punchline is, you hear someone from the back say, hold your fire, men. And the guy says, low morale, I'm guessing. As the president shows up and somebody yells out, hold your fire. What can I say? I'm easily amused. Okay, this is another hardcover. I have many hardcovers of this. I grab it whenever I see it. Of a book that I have praised many times on this channel. This is by William Service, and this is his book, Owl. Tiny little thing about taking an owl into his house. There's an owl hiding on the bookshelf. Taking a little owl into his life and just living with the bird. And it's amazing. It's an amazingly moving book. And wonderful and interesting. What's this next skinny thing? Oh, okay. All right, this is the aforementioned William Goldman. This is James Goldman. This is The Lion in Winter. This is the play, The Lion in Winter. Random House came out with it as a trade paperback with, bewilderingly, this as the cover. I do not understand that cover at all. That corresponds to absolutely nothing in the play. Nothing at all. Maybe if it were 2 young men, then it might correspond to a moment, at least a story that's told in the play, where the young king of France is taunting Henry II with his memories of an early encounter with Henry's son Richard, where he fell from his horse and was knocked senseless, and he awoke to Richard touching him. And where he finishes his story by telling Henry, I don't know how I did it, except to one day tell you all about it. but that is I don't know who those 2 are supposed to be. But it's a very pretty trade paperback. No idea when The Lion in Winter will ever be reprinted, if it ever is, so I grabbed it. Oh, all right, great. Well, we're running along on time here, so that's lucky that we can do this next one, because this is 4 Penguin Orange trade paperbacks of P.G. Woodhouse. 4 of them. Life at Blandings, Imperial Blandings, Weekend Woodhouse, and Life with G's. Or Vintage Woodhouse. Weekend Woodhouse is something else. These all have these wonderful covers meant to evoke the 20s, or the roaring 30s. Except for Imperial Blandings. Imperial Blandings has the Empress of Blandings on it. Yes, it does. Okay. And these trade paperbacks are in here because I routinely go back to them. I have many, many, many Woodhouse anthologies, but I love the feel of these old trade paperbacks. Just love them. So when I saw a bunch of them, I grabbed them all. I think there are 2 more that I don't have, but it doesn't matter because I have a ton of other Woodhouse in this room and all of Woodhouse on ebook. They're just here because I like the format. And then we'll finish up with this last one, which is tiny. Oh, okay. All right, this is copy number 2. We have now seen 2 copies of this, but that's all right. In this particular case, you can't get enough copies of this book. It is a Dude Bro classic, after all, about how to crush your enemies. It goes along really well with Stoicism. This is The Art of War by Sun Tzu, in a new translation in W.W. Norton by Michael Nyland. A very stylish little hardcover of a book that is worth reading. And this one has a blurb on the back cover of the hardcover by Dennis Washburn, who did a translation of The Tale of Genji that will turn up in this library tour, and also a blurb by me. Dennis Washburn and I are together on this back cover. Can you see it? Can you see it? Which means that this is a volume to have. It is a volume to have and to treasure. That if you're going to get a copy of Sun Tzu because you need something to occupy your time when you pour your ostentatious tumbler of whiskey in your oak-paneled, book-lined study in order to commune with the spirits of dead dude bros, if you're going to do that, and Sun Tzu is of course going to be one of those books along with Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, then it had best be this version. The very best you can do in your time-wasting dude bro adulation is to have Steve along for the ride. So there you go. That is, I'm going to put some of these back here. That is the next chapter. I think we're up to chapter 5 or 6 here. of the 2022 Hyde Cottage Library Tour. So I'm gonna wrap this up and try to upload it, and we'll move along next time to lower down shelves. I will be sitting for the next couple of videos. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.